The weight of the silence in our house had become a physical presence, a third occupant that settled into the cushions of our sofa and dimmed the lights a little more each day. It was a silence born not of peace, but of exhaustion, a thick, woolen blanket of fatigue that my wife, Chloe, had woven around herself thread by thread over the past 2 years. It was a Tuesday, I think. They all bled together. The faint, digital glow of 7:02 p.m. from the microwave was the only clock that mattered. I'd just gotten home from the architectural firm, my own shoulders aching with the weight of blueprints and deadlines. The familiar scent of lemon-scented cleaner hung in the air, a testament to Chloe's relentless, and seemingly joyless, upkeep of our home. She was on the couch, curled into the corner, a throw blanket pulled up to her chin even though the house was warm. Her eyes were fixed on the television, but they weren't seeing the sitcom laugh track that echoed emptily through the room. They were distant, glazed over. I'd come to know that look intimately. It was the look of someone who had given all their fuel to the day and had nothing left for the night, or for me. "Hey, honey," I said, my voice softer than I intended, trying not to startle her. I dropped my briefcase by the door and walked over, leaning down to kiss her forehead. Her skin was cool. "Tough day?" She didn't look at me. Her gaze remained on the flickering screen. A sigh, so deep it seemed to originate from the very core of her, escaped her lips. "I'm just so tired, Mark," she whispered. The words were barely audible, but they hit me with the force of a physical blow. They were the same words I heard almost every night. "I'm too tired." "Not tonight, Mark. My head is pounding. I just need to close my eyes." I felt the familiar cocktail of frustration, concern, and a deep, gnawing loneliness churn in my gut. I loved Chloe. I loved the woman she used to be, the one with the explosive laugh that could light up a room, the one who would drag me out for spontaneous midnight drives to look at the stars, the one whose passion for her graphic design work was matched only by her passion for us. Where had that woman gone? "I know," I said, the words feeling inadequate. I sat on the edge of the couch, my hand finding hers under the blanket. It lay there, limp and unresponsive. "Is there anything I can do? Do you want me to make you some tea? Or we could just talk?" Another sigh. This one was heavier, laced with the impatience that stung. "Talk about what, Mark? There's nothing to talk about. I'm just tired. All the time. It's just life." Life. The word had become a prison. It was the reason we hadn't been intimate in months. The reason our conversations had been whittled down to logistics, bills, groceries, whose turn it was to take the car for an oil change. We were roommates, co-managers of a quiet, beige existence. "Okay," I said, the fight draining out of me. I stood up, my knees cracking in the quiet. "I'll go figure out some dinner, then." That was when the doorbell rang. The sound was so foreign, so unexpected in our evening ritual of silence, that we both jumped. Chloe finally looked away from the TV, a flicker of confusion in her tired eyes. "Are you expecting anyone?" "No," I said, frowning. I walked to the door and peered through the peephole. It was Sarah, Chloe's best friend since college, a whirlwind of energy and sharp wit in a 5'4" package. Her auburn hair was piled into a messy but stylish bun, and she held a paper bag from the local Italian place in one hand and a bottle of red wine in the other. She was grinning, her eyes sparkling with unspoken mischief. I opened the door, a genuine smile touching my lips for the first time that day. "Sarah, hey, this is a surprise. A good one, I hope," she chirped, breezing past me into the house. She immediately shed her coat, tossed it onto a chair, and zeroed in on Chloe on the couch. "Okay, I've had it. You've been ghosting my texts for a week, and you have that I'm a shell of a human look in your profile picture. Intervention time." I brought carbonara and a cabernet that's probably too good for our current mood, but we're going to drink it anyway. Chloe managed a weak smile. "Hi, Sarah. You didn't have to do that." "Of course I did," Sarah said, already marching into the kitchen and starting to pull down plates as if she lived here. "Now, come on up, both of you. Table now." There was an authority in her voice that was hard to resist. Even Chloe, with her leaden limbs, slowly untangled herself from the blanket and shuffled towards the dining table. For a brief, hopeful moment, the oppressive silence lifted, replaced by the clatter of plates, the glug of wine being poured, and Sarah's relentless, cheerful chatter about her work at the ad agency and a disastrous date she'd been on. For 20 minutes, it was almost like old times. The food was rich and comforting. The wine was, indeed, too good, but it warmed my insides and loosened the knot in my chest. Chloe even laughed at one of Sarah's stories, a short, breathy sound, but a laugh nonetheless. I felt myself relaxing, the frustration of the earlier hour receding. But as the plates were cleared and the wine glasses were refilled, I saw the curtain begin to descend again. Chloe's smile became strained. Her shoulders slumped. She was retreating back into her fortress of fatigue. Sarah saw it too. Her eyes, sharp and perceptive, flicked from Chloe to me and back again. She leaned forward, her voice losing its playful edge and becoming gentle. Okay, honey, talk to me. For real this time. What's going on? Is it work? Is it everything? Chloe looked down at her wine glass, tracing the stem with her finger. The familiar, weary mask settled back onto her face. It's nothing, Sarah. Really, I'm so tired. All the time. You know how it is. Work is draining. The house is a constant mess. I just feel spent. I felt a familiar defensiveness rise in me. I worked too. I helped with the house. I did the laundry. I mowed the lawn. I tried to take things off her plate. But every time I tried to suggest that, it became an argument. It was as if my very existence was another demand on her depleted resources. Chloe, I said, my voice gentle but firm. We've talked about this. Maybe you should see a doctor. It could be your thyroid, or a vitamin deficiency, or… She cut me off, her voice sharpening. It's not a vitamin deficiency, Mark. It's life. It's just everything. You don't get it. You come home, and everything is still on me. The mental load, the constant thinking. She waved a hand vaguely. I'm just too tired. The words hung in the air, the finality of them hitting me like a door slamming shut. There it was, the immutable truth of our lives. I'm too tired. It was the end of every discussion, the answer to every question. It was a wall I had stopped trying to scale because I always fell back down, bruised and defeated. I looked down at my own hands, clenched in my lap. The hope that had flickered to life with Sarah's arrival sputtered and died. What was the point? I was fighting a ghost, wrestling with a shadow. The woman I loved was being consumed by this invisible monster of exhaustion, and I was powerless to save her. It was in that moment of utter defeat, as the silence threatened to swallow us whole again, that Sarah spoke. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the heaviness in the room with the precision of a laser. She wasn't looking at Chloe. She was looking directly at me, her gaze intense and unwavering. She's not too tired, Mark. The words were so simple, so stark, they didn't register at first. I blinked, thinking I'd misheard. Chloe stiffened beside me. What did you say? Chloe asked, her voice thin with disbelief. Sarah turned her head slowly, her gaze shifting to her best friend. There was no malice in her eyes, only a profound and painful sadness. You're not too tired, Chloe. You're unhappy. The air left my lungs. It was as if someone had thrown a switch, illuminating a dark room I'd been stumbling through for years. Unhappy. The word echoed, vast and terrifying. Chloe's face flushed. That's not true. How can you say that? You have no idea what my life is like. I have every idea, Sarah said, her voice still calm but firm. I've been watching it for 2 years. You're not tired from work. You're tired of your life. You're tired of this. She gestured around the room, at the perfectly clean, perfectly decorated, perfectly sterile house. You're tired of going through the motions. You're tired of a marriage that feels like a business partnership. Sarah, that's enough. Chloe snapped, her eyes flashing with a fire I hadn't seen in years. It was anger, but it was also life. It was something. No, it's not enough. Sarah shot back, her own voice rising slightly. Someone has to say it. Look at him, Chloe. She pointed a finger at me. Really look at him. Mark is a good man. He loves you. He's here, night after night, trying to figure out what he's doing wrong, trying to fix a problem he can't even name because you keep calling it tiredness. He's walking on eggshells in his own home, terrified of asking for a single crumb of affection because you might be too tired. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Sarah was articulating the silent scream that had been building inside me for months. She was giving a name to the ghost. You used to light up a room, Sarah continued, her voice softening again, cracking with emotion. You used to drag me to art galleries and talk for hours about color theory and negative space. You and Mark used to be the couple that made the rest of us believe in love. What happened to that? When did you decide to just check out? Chloe was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. She wasn't looking at either of us. You don't understand, she whispered, but the conviction was gone from her voice. It was a plea, a confession. Then make me understand, Sarah urged, leaning forward and grabbing Chloe's hand. Talk to us. Talk to him. This tiredness is a lie you're telling yourself because the truth is too scary to face. The truth is that you're lost, and you're too afraid to admit it. So you've built this fortress of fatigue and you're letting the best parts of your life, your marriage, your passion, your joy, wither away outside the walls. The truth of Sarah's words was a physical ache in my chest. I looked at Chloe, really looked at her, not as the source of my frustration, but as the woman I had fallen in love with. I saw the fear in her eyes, the profound sadness that had been masquerading as exhaustion. I saw the ghost of the vibrant, creative woman she once was, trapped inside this shell of duty and despair. Is it true? I asked, my voice a hoarse whisper. Chloe, are you unhappy? The dam broke. A sob racked her body, and she buried her face in her hands. The sound was raw, guttural, filled with a pain that her quiet sighs of fatigue had never conveyed. I don't know, she cried, her words muffled. I don't know what's wrong with me. I just feel empty, like I'm on a treadmill and I can't get off. Everything feels so heavy. And I see you, Mark, trying so hard, and it just makes me feel worse because I know I should feel something, and I don't. I just feel nothing. And I'm so sorry. She was apologizing. For the first time in 2 years, it wasn't an excuse, it was an admission. The wall was crumbling. I moved without thinking. I got up from my chair, knelt beside hers, and wrapped my arms around her. She collapsed into me, her body shaking with sobs. I held her tight, my own eyes stinging with tears. I was holding my wife, but it felt like I was holding her for the first time in years. I was holding the pain, not the symptom. Sarah quietly stood up, gathered the plates, and took them into the kitchen, giving us a moment of privacy. The clinking of dishes was a gentle, domestic sound, anchoring us back to reality, but a new reality, one where the unspoken had finally been spoken. We sat like that for a long time, me on my knees, Chloe in the chair, clinging to each other in the wreckage of the lie we'd been living. When Chloe's sobs finally subsided into hiccuping breaths, she pulled back slightly, her face puffy and streaked with tears. She looked at me, her eyes red-rimmed but clear, truly clear, for the first time in memory. I'm so sorry, Mark, she whispered. I didn't know how to say it. I was just so scared. I know, I said, brushing a tear from her cheek. I was scared, too. I thought I was losing you. I think I was lost, she admitted. I don't even know when it started. Maybe after my mum passed away. I just put my head down and started running. And I never looked up. I stopped designing for fun. I stopped seeing my friends. I stopped being your wife. I just became a machine that cleans and works and sleeps. Sarah came back into the room, her expression soft. She placed a box of tissues on the table and sat down quietly, a silent pillar of support. We can fix this, I said, the words feeling true for the first time. We can find you again. We can find us again. It wasn't a magic cure. That night was the beginning of a long, difficult, and often painful journey. Chloe started seeing a therapist to untangle the grief and anxiety she'd been burying. We started couples counseling, learning how to communicate again, not as adversaries, but as partners fighting a common enemy, the disconnect that had grown between us. There were more tears. There were hard conversations that lasted late into the night. We had to learn to be vulnerable with each other again, to voice our fears and our needs without accusation or defensiveness. I learned that my fix-it approach, while well-intentioned, had made Chloe feel like her feelings were a problem to be solved, not a state to be understood. She learned that her withdrawal had felt like a rejection, and that her tiredness had built a wall around her that I couldn't penetrate. We made changes, small ones at first. I took over all the grocery shopping, a task she secretly hated. We instituted a mandatory no phones, no TV hour after dinner where we just talked, or sometimes just sat in comfortable silence, holding hands. We started going on walks, not for exercise, but for connection, pointing out interesting clouds or weird garden gnomes in the neighborhood. And slowly, like a plant finally receiving water after a long drought, Chloe began to come back to life. She set up her old drawing tablet in the corner of the living room. At first, she just stared at it. Then, one Saturday, I came home to find her completely absorbed, creating a digital painting of our dog. She didn't look up for an hour. She wasn't tired. She was immersed. The laughter returned, tentative at first, then more frequent, until one day I heard her on the phone with Sarah, her old, raucous laugh echoing down the hall, and my heart felt like it would burst. The intimacy returned, too. It wasn't a switch that was flipped, but a slow, tender reawakening. A kiss that lasted a moment longer than necessary. A hand that lingered on a shoulder. A night where we stayed up talking in bed, and one thing led to another, not out of obligation, but out of a rekindled desire, a rediscovered connection. Sarah's intervention that Tuesday night hadn't been an accusation, it had been a rescue mission. She had loved Chloe enough to tell a painful truth, and she had loved me enough to see my suffering and name it. She had thrown a lifeline into the quiet, drowning sea of our marriage, and we had, against all odds, grabbed hold. Our story didn't end with a single conversation. It began with one. The title, "My wife whispered I'm too tired again, but her best friend looked at me and said I'm not," wasn't about betrayal or secret attraction. It was about a truth so obvious it had become invisible, spoken by the one person brave enough to see it and say it aloud. It was the moment the lights came back on, and we finally saw the monster we were fighting, not in each other, but in the space between us. And we decided, together, to fight it, hand in hand.